The last words my husband David ever said to me were, "Please don't go to the retreat property, Naomi. Promise me." His hand was cold in mine, his eyes desperate. I promised, believing it was just another of his strange quirks. One last act of control from a man who had always kept parts of himself hidden. I never imagined that promise would become the key to uncovering the greatest secret of his life and my own rebirth after his death. 17 years of marriage ended in a hospital bed. David suffered a massive stroke at 59, and in a single night I became a widow. Our daughter Chloe was in college, and the house felt emptier than I could bear. Grief made every hour stretch endlessly, and yet time kept moving as if nothing had happened. 2 months later, David's attorney, Mr. Harrison, called me into his office. His tone was formal, but his eyes were sympathetic. "Mrs. Sterling, your husband left instructions for a delivery after his passing." He slid a small box and an envelope toward me. Inside the box was a heavy antique key with a leaf-shaped chain. The envelope carried my name in David's unmistakable handwriting. "My dearest Naomi," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means I left sooner than expected. Forgive me for the secrets I kept. The house is yours now. I once made you promise never to go there, but now I ask you to. In the study, you'll find my laptop. The password is the date of our first meeting followed by the word hope. I love you more than I could ever express. David." I turned to the attorney in confusion. "What house?" "It's called Crestwood Estate," he explained. "Your husband bought it about 4 years ago in Lake Arrowhead. He left explicit instructions that you only be told after his death." It made no sense. David had never mentioned another property. We weren't wealthy enough for secret mansions, and he had always avoided talking about his childhood in that very town. Mr. Harrison added that the estate had recently become valuable. Developers were building a luxury resort nearby, and the land was worth several $1 million. That night, I sat staring at the key, unable to sleep. David had hidden so much, yet in death he had invited me to uncover it. 2 days later, I drove to Lake Arrowhead. The gate read, "Crestwood Estate in wrought iron." Beyond it stood a sprawling stone and wood mansion surrounded by gardens and towering oaks. My heart pounded as I turned the key in the front door. Inside, sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating a grand living room and walls lined with paintings, hundreds of them. Orchids of every kind and color, my favorite flower, the very symbol of beauty and fragility I had always loved. Tears blurred my eyes. David had filled this secret home with my passion. Then near the window I saw a silver laptop with a white orchid resting on top. I sat down, entered the password, October 12 Hope, and the screen flickered to life. A video file appeared titled For Naomi. When I clicked play, David's familiar face filled the screen. Healthy, smiling, the man I had lost. "Hello, my love," he said. "If you're watching this, you finally broke your promise." He chuckled softly. "I recorded these videos for you, one for each day of your first year without me, to explain what I couldn't while alive." He paused, his smile fading. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a cerebral aneurysm. I didn't tell you because I wanted to live, not die in slow motion. I spent the time I had left building this place for you, a sanctuary filled with the things you love." I covered my mouth, sobbing. He had hidden his illness, his suffering, even as he created beauty in secret. A sudden noise outside made me freeze. Through the window, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. 3 men stepped out, all resembling David, his brothers, Marcus, Elijah, and Isaiah, the family he rarely spoke of. They walked to the porch, their faces cold. "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus called. "We need to talk about the property." I locked the door, heart pounding. David's vague warnings about his family echoed in my head. They pounded again, but I ignored them, returning to the laptop. On screen, David's voice turned serious. "My brothers will come for this house, Naomi. They mocked me when I bought it, but now that it's worth millions, they'll want it. Don't trust them. In the drawer beneath this table, you'll find the documents proving it's legally yours. Keep them safe. As I pulled out the blue folder he mentioned, a knock sounded again, louder this time. Then a voice called, "County officer here, ma'am, please. Open the door." I took a deep breath, clutching the folder, and went to face the inevitable. The officer on the porch was young enough to be my student, his badge gleaming in the pale mountain sun. Behind him, the three Sterling brothers stood shoulder to shoulder, a wall of entitlement. I greeted the officer first, keeping my voice level. He explained they had a temporary inspection order related to a pending inheritance claim. I handed him the blue folder David had prepared, the notarized deed transfer bank records, and a letter from the original owner, David's father, confirming the sale years earlier. The officer read in silence while Marcus shifted impatiently. Elijah tried to peek over his shoulder, and Isaiah stared past me into the house, as if he could already see a future that belonged to him. When the officer finished, he cleared his throat and returned the folder. "The documentation appears valid, ma'am. Any dispute should go through civil court. I'll note that in my report." The brothers erupted with overlapping objections until the officer's raised palm ended them. A minute later, they were back in their SUV, leaving a spray of gravel and the promise of a fight. The house felt different once they were gone, still beautiful, but charged with a new alertness, as if the beams and stones remembered old storms. I returned to the laptop. David's next video began with a soft apology. He knew I would be furious about the diagnosis he hid, but he begged me to see the intention beneath the secrecy. He spoke of rebuilding Crestwood piece by piece, of the contractors he trusted, of the specialized horticulturist he hired to create something extraordinary behind the house. "Go to the conservatory, Naomi," he said, eyes bright. "It's the heart of this place. Your heart." Glass and light greeted me. Beyond the double doors, an ocean of orchids rose like a living cathedral, cascading phalaenopsis, starry oncidiums, waxy vandas suspended from cedar slats, and in the center, an impossible blue cataleya that appeared to hold the sky itself in its petals. A woman stepped from between benches with a mister in her hand, gray-streaked hair pulled into a neat knot. "Good morning. You must be Mrs. Sterling. I'm Ms. Jackson. Mr. David hired me to care for the collection." She said his name with a quiet respect that made my throat tighten. She told me David had visited monthly for years, always arriving with new ideas, and a list always ending by asking whether I thought I would like it. "He never said your name without smiling," she added, and I had to look away until my eyes steadied. I asked if the brothers had been around before. Her mouth tightened. "They came snooping last spring when the resort's survey flags appeared across the ridge. They called the place a rotting relic until they learned its new value. After that, they started bringing appraisers." Mr. David anticipated trouble. "He always did," I murmured, and let the scent of vanilla and leaf mold fill the ache in my chest. Back in the house, the laptop's third video opened to David sitting in a room I hadn't seen. He panned the camera to bare windows and soft northern light. "The studio," he said. "For the painter I married who put away her brushes to raise a family and grade papers at midnight." He told me where to find the key. The door unlocked with a clean click, and I stepped into a space arranged with the precision and generosity of love. Sturdy easels, archival drawers, natural bristle brushes sorted by size, oil colors nested in tidy rows, a deep basin for washing a stool with the exact backrest that never hurt my spine. In a low cabinet, I discovered a flat box that made me gasp. My old canvases, the student works I thought lost to moves and flooded basements, each wrapped and labeled in David's meticulous print. On a note taped to the top, he had written, "She's still in there, Naomi. I saved what you gave up. Use it when you're ready." The phone vibrated in my pocket. Chloe's name filled the screen. "Mom, why didn't you tell me Dad owned an estate?" Her breath came fast, hurt sharpening her words. "Uncle Marcus just called. They want to meet. They said you're confused and need help deciding. They said this property was meant for family." My grief and anger collided. "Don't agree to anything I said. I'll explain everything tonight." But by late afternoon, She texted again. I'm coming up. We're meeting at 6:00 p.m. Don't make this ugly. The time made me flinch. They had her moving on their clock. At 5:40 p.m., tires crunched over gravel. Two vehicles, my daughter's silver SUV and the brother's black one, rolled to a stop. Chloe jumped out first, as poised as any 21-year-old could be when certainty was slipping. She looked from me to the house to the gardens, awe flickering despite her anger. The men followed with their lawyerly folder and their benevolent expressions. They praised the property as if they were doing me a favor by noticing it, then laid out a division that sounded neutral. 1/3 for me, 1/3 for Chloe, 1/3 for them. No one fights. Elijah assured the practiced cadence of a man who'd talked juries into doubt. Your father left the entire estate to me, I replied. Not because he loved you less, Chloe, but because he wanted a clear steward. And because his brothers cannot be trusted. Marcus's smile thinned. Big words for a literature professor facing millions in litigation costs. Chloe swallowed and asked why David had kept secrets from us if he was so clear-headed. The brothers leaned in as if she'd asked them to rescue her. I asked all of them to sit. The sun tilted lower. The windows turned gold. I placed David's blue folder on the table between us and slid out the deed. Then, with a calm I didn't feel, I told Chloe there was something she needed to see before she weighed any offer her father's own voice. She hesitated, eyes moving from the brothers' watchful faces to my open hand. For a long beat, the only sound was the clock in the hall marking 5:58 p.m. Finally, she took the laptop. I cued the file David had labeled, "For Chloe, when you doubt." Her father appeared whole and vibrant. "Hello, my brilliant girl," he began. Chloe's lips parted. The brothers shifted, annoyed by the invisible authority that suddenly filled the room. David admitted the illness, the secrecy, the purchase, then told her plainly what he had never told her in life, that his brothers once defrauded him of his share of the family inheritance, and would do it again if given the chance. "Whatever they promise, remember who you are," he said. "You don't need their approval. You are your mother's daughter." When the video ended, Chloe wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, and a new steadiness settled in her shoulders. She closed the laptop softly and handed it back to me. "I'm staying with Mom tonight," she told her uncles, "and I won't be signing anything." The men collected their glossy smiles and empty reassurances, but something brittle had cracked behind their eyes. As their SUV retreated down the drive, Chloe let out a long breath and leaned into me. "Okay," she said. "Tell me everything, and then let's decide what we're going to do." The morning after Chloe chose to stay with me, the mountain air carried a different stillness, less dread, more resolve. We spent hours at the breakfast table going over every file David had left, tracing his plans as if following breadcrumbs through a forest he knew we would someday walk. Chloe's anger had cooled into curiosity, and her questions came fast. Why the secrecy? Why the house? Why rebuild something from his childhood he hated? Every answer seemed to reveal a new layer of David's careful strategy. He had built more than a home. He had built a fortress of meaning. By noon, Ms. Jackson appeared at the kitchen door, her expression serious. "Mrs. Sterling, there's something your husband told me never to reveal unless things got complicated." She led us outside past the conservatory and toward a weathered shed that looked out of place amid the manicured grounds. Inside, beneath garden tools and fertilizer bags, she revealed a trapdoor in the floor. "He called this his vault," she said, lifting it open. A narrow ladder led into darkness. The air below smelled of concrete and secrets. Ms. Jackson flipped a switch, and a tunnel came to life under fluorescent lights. At its end was a room filled with filing cabinets, maps, and computer monitors. It was a command center, David's war room. "This is where he prepared for his brothers," she explained. "He documented everything, how they used his name to commit fraud when he was 19, how they buried their crimes in shell companies, and more importantly, how Summit Resorts plans to buy this land for their secret expansion." I ran my hands over the maps. They showed multiple phases of the resort's construction. Phase 2 included a golf course that would swallow part of our land. Without Crestwood, the project couldn't proceed. He knew, I whispered. He knew this house was the key. Chloe examined the folders filled with notarized affidavits and financial records. He built leverage, she said. Evidence against them and power over the developers. Exactly, I replied. And now that power belongs to us. That night, I hardly slept. I watched several of David's videos in succession. He spoke of strategy, of patience, of knowing his brothers would try to exploit my grief. Marcus will charm. Elijah will manipulate the law. Isaiah will pretend neutrality. But they share one flaw, he said, eyes intent on the camera. They underestimate you. He was right. By morning, I had a plan. I arranged a private meeting with Chloe at a coffee shop in the city neutral ground, far from the estate's emotional pull. She arrived guarded, expecting another lecture, but I handed her a tablet with one of David's videos marked, "For Chloe, When You Doubt." We sat together as her father's voice filled the air again, explaining the betrayal he endured, how his brothers stole his inheritance and turned their father against him. Watching his eyes, clear and unflinching, broke through whatever fog the Sterlings had cast over her. "He was protecting us," Chloe whispered. "All this time." "Yes," I said softly. "And now it's our turn to protect what he built." By evening, we met with the attorney Mr. Harrison had recommended. His reaction to the evidence from David's vault was immediate shock, admiration, and then careful focus. "With this," he said, "you hold both legal and moral authority. If the brothers push, we push back harder with precision." 3 days later, right on cue, the Sterling brothers requested a final meeting. Their black SUV glided up the drive at 10 o'clock sharp. Chloe and I waited for them in the dining room, transformed into a boardroom, legal folders at every seat, coffee service on a silver tray, and a projector ready on the far wall. Marcus entered first, his voice coated in false civility. "Naomi, we're here to settle this like family." "I'm glad," I replied evenly. "I've prepared a short presentation to ensure everyone understands what's at stake." When the map of the Crestwood estate appeared on the screen, the brothers leaned forward in confusion. "You're looking at the full 25 acres, I explained. Not the 10 you conveniently listed in your proposal. The remaining acreage covers the western slope, which happens to overlap with the future expansion of Summit Resort's golf course." Marcus's confident smile froze. "That's not public knowledge." "It is now," I said. Before they could respond, the door opened. In walked Mr. Alston, CEO of Summit Resorts, followed by my attorney. The brothers went rigid. "Gentlemen," I said, "thank you for joining us. We're all here to discuss the property's future." The color drained from Elijah's face. "You went to the developers." "I thought it was time everyone spoke honestly," I replied. "Mr. Alston, these men claim to represent the family's interests. I assume they did not disclose that the property is mine alone." Mr. Alston's brow furrowed. "They did not. In fact, we were told they had exclusive rights to negotiate. That's a serious misrepresentation." I watched the realization ripple through the room. They had cornered themselves exactly as David predicted. My attorney began distributing envelopes. Inside were copies of David's documentation, proof of past fraud, and false claims that could destroy their reputations. "Mrs. Sterling." Marcus sputtered. "This is extortion." "No," I said calmly. "It's truth. You spent decades burying it. I'm just giving it light." The meeting ended with silence, then slow defeat. The brothers left stripped of allies and pretense, while Summit Resorts remained behind to negotiate directly with me. That night, Chloe and I sat in the conservatory, surrounded by orchids glowing in the moonlight. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said, smiling through tears. "We did it." And David guided every step. The days that followed felt strangely calm, like the quiet after a long storm. The Sterling brothers had retreated into silence. No more phone calls, no more lawyers, no more threats. Their arrogance had dissolved into the one thing they could never fake: fear. My attorney confirmed that Summit Resorts was eager to finalize a partnership. But unlike most landowners who would have jumped at a multi-million-dollar payout, I had no interest in simply selling what David built. When the Summit CEO, Mr. Alston, returned a week later, he came not with contracts, but with respect. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, "your husband described you as someone who values legacy over profit." I can see now what he meant. I smiled softly. "Legacy and integrity can coexist, Mr. Alston. I'm willing to negotiate, but under one condition. The Crestwood estate must remain as it is. The gardens, the art studio, the conservatory, those stay untouched." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Agreed. We'll adapt the project accordingly." That evening, Chloe and I stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the orchids in soft gold. "Dad really thought of everything," she murmured. "He did," I said, resting my hand on her shoulder. "But now it's our turn to think ahead." We spent the following month restructuring the agreement into something revolutionary, a partnership that preserved David's vision while securing financial independence for generations. The Crestwood estate became both a conservation landmark and a symbol of renewal. Chloe moved back home temporarily, and together we watched the empty spaces of our lives fill again with purpose, with art, with forgiveness. Each morning began the same way, coffee sunlight streaming through the glass walls of the conservatory and one of David's videos. We had grown accustomed to his posthumous companionship. His voice was now as much a part of the house as the ticking clock in the hallway. One afternoon, Chloe appeared at my studio doorway holding the laptop. "Mom, today's video is for you. Alone." I hesitated. We'd always watched them together. "Why?" She smiled. "Because he said so." When she left, I pressed play. David appeared in the art studio before it was finished, bare floors, white walls, light pouring in from the east. "If you're watching this, my love," he began, "you've finally picked up a brush again." His smile was tender, almost teasing. I built this room for that moment. Not for grief, but for creation. He gestured around the empty space. "You gave up so much for our family, your art, your dreams, yourself. I want you to paint again. Not for galleries, not for others, for you." Behind the storage cabinet is a canvas. It's blank, waiting. When you're ready, fill it with what you've learned about love, loss, and renewal. That will be the real legacy. I closed the laptop, tears sliding down my cheeks. The blank canvas was exactly where he said it would be: tall, pristine, intimidating. I stood before it for hours, the silence of the studio broken only by my heartbeat. Then slowly, I began to paint. Days turned into weeks as I lost myself in color and form. The house, the orchids, the forest, they all found their way into the composition. At the center, I painted 3 figures: a man offering a single blue orchid to 2 women, one young, one older. Behind them, a home glowed with warm light, its windows open to the world. It was us, David, Chloe, and me, frozen in a timeless moment of peace. When I finished, I hung the painting in the great room above the fireplace. Chloe stood beside me, tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It feels like he's still here." "In a way he is," I said. "Every choice we make keeps him alive." Months later, the first phase of the Summit Partnership launched, honoring every clause I had fought for. The resort expanded responsibly, the estate remained untouched, and the Crestwood Foundation was born, funding arts and environmental programs across the state. Chloe became its first director, her leadership echoing both her father's intellect and my quiet persistence. One chilly morning, the doorbell rang. Ms. Jackson opened it and returned with a hesitant look. "Marcus Sterling is here," she said softly. I froze. "Did he bring a lawyer?" "No," she said, "just himself." Marcus looked smaller, frailer, his arrogance stripped away by illness and time. "Naomi," he said quietly, "I came to apologize. He told me he had terminal cancer." His voice trembled as he admitted what greed had cost him: the love of his brothers, the peace of his own heart. From his coat pocket he produced an old photograph: 3 boys beneath a towering tree, the youngest David holding a tiny potted orchid. I thought you and Chloe should have this, Marcus said. I accepted it silently. For the first time, I saw not a villain but a man carrying his own ghosts. Would you like to see the conservatory? I asked softly. He nodded. As we walked among David's orchids, Marcus stopped before the blue cattleya, the one David had searched years to find. He never stopped loving this place, he said. Or you. When he left, I felt something loosen inside me. Anger, grief, maybe both. Forgiveness didn't erase the past, but it lightened the weight of it. That night, I watched the final video David had left. His voice was steady, peaceful. This is the last message, my love. The house you feared has become your freedom. You've turned my secret into your strength. Promise me one thing, keep creating, keep living. The world needs your light. The screen went dark. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of orchids and rain. For the first time since his death, I didn't cry. I simply whispered, "Until someday, my love," and turned off the laptop. If my story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What promises have you kept for love, and which ones set you free?